Welcome to Swords and Hammers. Truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind alone forgets. The world is loud, but for the next few minutes, it can wait. Take a moment, settle yourself, listen well. Come, let us begin. But before we begin, we must first consider the Unbegun. The first word. Chapter 1. The Council in the Unbegun. Before the first dawn, before the first atom, before time itself was given leave to breathe, there was only God, and in that unbegun eternity, there was a silence. It was not the empty silence of a vacuum, a mere absence of noise. It was a silence that was itself a presence, full, resonant, and holy. It was the deep quiet of a mind that held all possibilities within itself. A silence pregnant with a word it had not yet spoken. For a universe can only be born into a silence holy enough to receive it. In that profound stillness, a council convened. Not a council of equals, for there is only one who is uncreated, but a gathering of the principles through which he would work. It was a council to unfold a purpose, to unfurl a blueprint for a story that would contain all other stories. At the head of this council was the master artisan, a voice of pure, incisive light, whose very nature was to examine, to clarify, to separate with surgical precision what is from what cannot possibly be. His gaze was fixed upon the first line of the divine blueprint. 10 words of such impossible power, they were the anchor of all that would follow. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It must be a foundation, the master artisan declared, his voice the sound of a truth that leaves no room for argument or appeal. It is the proposition upon which all subsequent truths will stand or fall. Our task is to dismantle every alternative, every lesser tale that begins with mud or chance or the dreary eternity of matter. The story we are to tell is not an option. It is an answer. It must be logic, and that logic, he paused, the light around him seeming to grow brighter, must be on fire. But logic alone, even logic that burns with the fire of 1,000 suns, can scorch the very ground it seeks to illuminate. It must be served as a treasured delicacy, and so a chorus of ancient voices was there to build a world for that fire to inhabit, to give it form and beauty. The first among them, an old pilgrim, with eyes that had seen the end of many long roads, spoke of a journey. This first line, he said, his voice weathered and kind, is not a statement, but a gate. It is the wicket gate to all reality. Before it lies the city of destruction, the grey land of hollow assumption and circular reasoning. After it lies the narrow path, and the only journey that matters. Then the logician, a man whose mind was as clear and well-ordered as a crystal, but whose heart was as warm as a hearth fire, added his own voice. But the gate must be one a modern mind can approach without scorning it. The journey must be paved with sound reason. We cannot ask the skeptic to make a blind leap into a fairy tale. We must show him, with brilliant analogy and good humor, that the fairy tale is the most rational explanation of all. For the greatest paradox is this: the story which seems the wildest is the only one that can make sense of the fact that we can make sense of anything at all. The first magic trick was not pulling a rabbit from a hat, but pulling a rational universe from a rational will. Finally, a mystic with a voice like starlight and a gaze that saw symbols in everything spoke of wonder. Reason may build the road, he whispered. But it is wonder that coaxes the traveller to take the first step. The story must not only be true, it must be enchanting. It must baptize the imagination, making the heart feel what the mind is about to know. It must have the quality of a fairy story, because it is the one true fairy story from which all others borrow their light. This was the task, then, to take the unassailable logic and serve it as an eternal delicacy, to build a house of diamond-hard reason, but to furnish it with the warmth and wonder of a home. Chapter 2. The Utterance and the Unfurling. The blueprint was complete. The design was perfect, the logic unassailable. The principles of story, reason, and wonder stood ready to give the creation its shape and texture. But they could not give it life. All that remained was the voice, not their own, but the voice of the one for whom they worked, the eternal Word, the Son, who was with God and was God, himself, the author, and the subject of the entire tale. The command was given from the throne of eternity. The moment had arrived, and the word was spoken. It was not a shout that shattered the silence, but a sound that gave the silence its purpose. It was a note of pure, generative power, a single, resonant chord that contained within it every future melody, every crash of a wave, every whisper of a lover, every cry of a newborn. From this one sound, all other sounds would be born. And the first thing that answered that sound was light. It did not seep in. It was not kindled from some lesser spark. It was a glorious, instantaneous dawn, an explosion of pure being that banished a darkness that had never, until that moment, known it was dark. For darkness, which had reigned as a king over a kingdom of nothing, understood in that instant, it was not a monarch, but a mere shadow, waiting for a substance. With this first divine command, absence was given its notice. It was no longer welcome. This was not the tame, filtered light of a household lamp. This was the wild, untamed, majestic glory of God made visible, a torrent of brilliance that was both law and beauty at once. It separated. It defined. With the edge of its invincible truth, it carved the heavens from the earth, drawing a clean and sovereign line between the ethereal and the material. This was the first great act of divine architecture, the raising of the cosmic cathedral's mighty roof from its earthen floor. The universe was born not in a struggle, but in a sentence. There was no chaos to be wrestled into submission, no rival god to be slain in some grim, cosmic war. There was only a sovereign will and an immediate, joyful obedience. God did not wrestle with the darkness. He simply made it irrelevant. He did not negotiate with the void. He filled it with himself. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Being. And so, the heavens and the earth came to be. The heavens unfurled like a royal standard, a tapestry of burning gas and spinning rock flung across the immensity. But it was not a random scattering. It was a reflection. Each star was a word in a great poem, each galaxy a verse singing of the terrible and lovely beauty of its maker. It was a beauty, designed to awaken something in the hearts of the creatures who would one day look up at it. An ache, a longing, a homesickness for a country they had never seen. It was a silent sermon, declaring the glory of God without a single word. And the earth hung in the velvet blackness, a jewel of swirling blue and white. At first, a world of potential, a canvas awaiting its colors, water without a shore, land without a shape. But even in its raw and primal state, it was pronounced good. It was good, not because it was finished, but because it was precisely what its creator intended it to be at that moment. It was the stage being set for the rest of the story, the place where the creator would walk in the cool of the day, where the great pilgrimage would unfold, and where the ultimate battle between the memory of that first light and a coming shadow would be waged. It was to be a place of both splendor and suffering, a cradle and a crucible. This grand architecture spoke of a God who was both transcendent and immanent. The sheer, mind-breaking scale of the heavens declared his utter otherness, his awesome majesty that is beyond our comprehension. Yet the intricate, delicate design of a single water molecule on the new earth spoke of a God who was intimately involved, a governor who cared for the smallest detail of his new domain. He was the king of the cosmos, but also the gardener of a single world. Chapter 4. The Listener in the Light. For this is the secret of that first sentence. It is not just the beginning of the world's story. It is the beginning of our own. It establishes our address in the cosmos. We are not cosmic orphans, the accidental and temporary byproduct of a blind, unthinking, and unguided process. We are creatures. We live in a created place. Our lives, our capacity for reason, our love of beauty, our inextinguishable hope for meaning, all of it is grounded in that one unshakable fact, that before us, behind us, and above us, there is a creator. The skeptical mind, the mind that prizes logic above all, looks at this and asks, is it reasonable to believe this? But that is the wrong question. The real question, the one that shakes the foundations of a world without a maker, is this. In a universe born of a mindless accident, from where do you get the very idea of reason? If your brain is nothing more than atoms in motion, why should you trust the thoughts it produces? A worldview that cannot account for the validity of the mind that holds it has destroyed its own credentials. Therefore, to deny the first 10 words of the story is to tear out the first page, only to find that the rest of the book becomes an incoherent and meaningless tale. But to accept it, to step through that ancient gate, is to find that every page that follows, every trial, every joy, every law, every promise is illuminated by the glory of that first spoken light. It is to understand that you are not standing in a cold, empty, and silent room, but rather you are standing in your Father's house. Selah.